Welcome, everyone, to day 2 of Colorectal Cancer Canada's conference. This afternoon's opening session consists, in fact, of 3 separate but integrated conversations to showcase the vast work underway to support innovation in clinical trials. From patient engagement, AI, real-world data, mHealth and wearables, and now blockchain, how we do cancer clinical trials is quickly and globally evolving. A reminder to our audience, please, to submit your questions as the session unfolds. There will be a Q&A at the end of the session, time permitting. Our first session today explores game-changing new clinical trial initiatives and models. Colorectal Cancer Canada is very pleased to welcome 5 extraordinary panelists, each of whom is driving innovation to the clinical trial process for the betterment of the healthcare ecosystem. Olivier Jerome is Director, Public and Patient Engagement at Catalyst. He brings both private and not-for-profit experiences to this conversation, including work with both cystic fibrosis and Melanoma Canada. Dr. Cam Caffey is an impact-driven physician entrepreneur focused on integrating artificial intelligence with system biology as Imagia's Director of Clinical Strategy and Oncology. He is also a former cancer immunology researcher. Dr. Victoria Lemieux is lead of the Blockchain Research Cluster at the University of British Columbia and an associate professor at the University of British Columbia School of Information. Dr. Lemieux also serves as Chief Information Security and Privacy Officer for the AI-driven personalized healthcare company Molecular U, and is currently working with the company to further develop a blockchain-based personal digital health wallet. Dr. Howard Lim is a medical oncologist at BC Cancer, Vancouver Centre, and a clinical associate professor in the Faculty of Medicine at the University of British Columbia. He specializes in gastrointestinal malignancies and is also actively involved in clinical trials, ethics, and genomic-based research. Our panel lead likely needs no introduction, and as he is a very profiled executive in the cancer care ecosystem. Dr. Laszlo Radványi is the president and scientific director of the Ontario Institute for Cancer Research, bringing over 30 years of oncology research background in academia and leadership experience in international pharma and biotech. He is also professor in the immunology department at the University of Toronto. Dr. Radványi, I'll pass it over to you for an amazing panel.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Indeed, and I thank Colorectal Cancer Canada for inviting me to really facilitate this really illustrious panel discussion, which is really timely right now with these really illustrious panel members. We really have entered a new age of challenges and opportunities in cancer care, where advances in molecular biology, immunology, data science, and clinical care necessitate us to rethink about how drug development and clinical trials are done in order to realize the promise of precision oncology. And where we treat the patient with the right combination of drugs at the right time, the right dose, and for the right amount of time, while monitoring their outcomes using traditional and innovative methods. We're also on the heels of the COVID-19 pandemic that has caused us to rethink how we are doing academic and clinical research, and the immense need for multi-center collaborative approaches that generate large data sets, where we need to accrue larger patient numbers in order to drive a biomarker and data efforts for precision medicine. And also, we're moving into the realm of earlier cancer detection and interception, with more and more focus on treating patients earlier after disease diagnosis before surgical interventions. This really necessitates a rethinking of how we coordinate and do clinical trials and collect big data to drive precision medicine. And also, we all realize that drug development is just way too expensive and too lengthy. It takes $2.6 billion or over $2 billion to develop a drug. And we need to develop better ways of doing it that are faster, more efficient. And also, many approved drugs in the accelerated approval process don't turn out to actually affect overall survival. So we need to do better. And Canada, even with our health system, is really poised to make a huge difference in the precision medicine field. And I think if we get together and do it right and come up with new clinical trial paradigms and ways of collecting data, Canada could become a world leader and proving ground for new therapeutics in oncology. So I'd like to call upon each individual panel member to just briefly just introduce their viewpoint and their perspectives on this topic. And then we will then go into sort of some deeper discussions about data and the challenges in data, some of the issues with the need for real world data collection. And then I will call upon Victoria afterwards again to talk about some of these new solutions that blockchain can offer. And then we'll end with the discussion on sort of more on the patient perspective, because we need patients to be more and more involved in how we do clinical trials. So Victoria, if I may just call upon you to sort of just give some of your opening comments and thoughts.
Great. Thank you so much, Laszlo. And let me just say that I'm honored and humbled to be participating on this panel with such a stellar group of individuals. Hello from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people here on UBC campus. I'd just like to open by sharing my perspective as a blockchain researcher, academic, and also someone who is working to develop and implement blockchain technology right now. And my observation is that despite implementation of quality assurance procedures, current clinical trial management processes are time-consuming, costly, and often susceptible to error. And this can result in limited trust and transparency and process inefficiencies that have already been mentioned by Laszlo, and without true patient empowerment. Blockchain technology could enforce trust, transparency, and patient empowerment, in my view, and really lead to massive improvements in the clinical trial data management processes and reduce trial costs as well. So the clinical trial ecosystem being highly complex and involving different stakeholders can result in limited trust, transparency, and process inefficiencies. And so the key takeaway that I hope to convey in this panel is the huge potential, the significant opportunity that exists to improve the quality of clinical trial processes and record keeping through the application of blockchain technology. So thanks. Back over to you, Laszlo.
I'm excited to get deeper into with you, I should say, with this discussion on blockchain. I'd like to talk just to tease now some viewpoints from Cam. Cam, if you're there, some of your just beginning introductory remarks and perspectives on this question of clinical trial.
Absolutely. Thank you, Laszlo. Hello, everyone from Montreal. So I've been lucky to be in quite a unique position where over my career, I've been involved in clinical oncology and bringing treatments to patients. And over the past 5 years, really sitting in a place where I'm working to bring digital health technologies and AI to practice. Our biggest initiative has been with the TFRI, where we're co-leading the Digital Health and Discovery Platform, a pan-Canadian initiative to enable AI-driven multi-centric research by providing all the technical infrastructure and components to initiate big data initiatives in Canadian healthcare. And what I'm really excited about is the opportunity to see how the growth of consumer electronics and the adoption of digital health technologies by healthcare organizations can improve the dynamics of care, increasing the quantity and flow of information, as well as the tools that are available to both patients and doctors in between visits. And I think this is quite exciting as we're gaining the ability to communicate better and have a lot of tools. There are quite a few gaps still, however, because I think the perception of what is possible is much further ahead than what we can actually deliver today. And that's in part because healthcare institutes weren't designed as information technology organizations. And on the consumer side, everything's been built really purely on a commercial angle without a consideration of how current care delivery happens. So excited to talk about how all these new tools are really changing the landscape and everything that's possible.
Thank you, Cam. I appreciate that. So I'm going to turn to Howard. Howard, thank you for joining and excited to have you. And if you can give some of your introductory perspectives on how we can move into, more newer clinical trial paradigms, especially from your perspective with real world data and patient reported outcomes.
Thank you so much, Lazo. And it's a real great honor to be part of this panel. I'm a medical oncologist and been involved in personalized healthcare and what our oncogenomics program here in British Columbia for the last 10 years. And often what happens is precision oncology has created these rare cancer subsets. And so with our clinical trial paradigm, we really have these single-arm phase 2 studies. And while we have these impressive results, they're rather underpowered and makes doing health technology assessments for drug funding difficult. So in BC, what we've done is really partner up with Roche to launch a pilot program called PREDICT, which is our precision oncology evidence development cancer treatment program with the drug entrectinib right now. And what we're trying to do is use health economic endpoints for health technology assessment and defining a minimum data set that we can generate out of real world evidence. So what we're trying to do is incorporate real world data generated from clinical data and patient related outcomes, such as quality of life assessments, to supplement clinical trial data. And hopefully by combining the source data from trials with real world data, this will provide greater evidence generation and statistical power for precision oncology. And our main aim is actually that this real world data in combination with trial data will start to generate a learning healthcare system that then supports ongoing innovation. And hopefully we can improve patient health and ensure value, quality, and safety overall. So thank you very much.
Howard. And then lastly, I'll turn to Olivier. If you can give me some, in your role in patient engagement, if you can just give us your initial perspectives from the patient engagement and the role of patients in all this.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thank you for putting on this great conference and inviting us today to discuss this key topic. So, for the Catalyst, Clinical Trial Quebec, if I may brand ourselves like this, it is more self-descriptive. It is a public-private partnership that was created a few years ago in 2017 as part of the Stratégie québécoise des sciences de la vie. So it's a governmental mandate in Quebec to basically increase the number of clinical trials that are held. So the unique positioning is kind of key for our discussion today, where we know innovation, especially data, is the face of modern medicine, and we have to bring in together all these important stakeholders in the environment that has been working in silo. Yes, there have been improvement, but there's great opportunities ahead if we can make people collaborate. I'm just thinking about governments that are promoters of innovation in healthcare, industry and searchers that are the owners of innovation in healthcare. The Réseau de la Santé and the clinicians are the users of innovation in healthcare, and ultimately patients and caregivers are the beneficiary of innovation in healthcare. And all of these key stakeholders, they do have their own data set that they use, but currently everything is in silo, and where we see the major opportunities to benefit from this change in the environment is to collaborate, build bridges, work together, and make sure that we all work in a common effort to leverage that for the good of the beneficiary, ultimately, of innovation in healthcare, the patients. At the end of the day, there is an unmet besoin de santé, if I may say, but it is to fill the gap in terms of patient treatments, and this is where innovation comes, but more and more data is the key. So pretty sure we're going to find some interesting viewpoints today with all our panelists on the topic.
Thanks, Olivier. So I guess I want to get right into it. And I think the first sort of area that I'd like to delve into, which is really the big issue, is data, big data. How do we share it? How do we make it work? And what are the challenges right now in Canada? So Cam, I'd like to just ask you a couple of questions about what you feel are the challenges in preventing the widespread adoption of digital health technologies in our current healthcare environment? And what are some of the new digital technologies that can help solve these problems?
So the way I like to think of it in a simplified way is that as we're getting more and more tools into the hands of physicians, organizations, patients, consumers, a couple things are happening. One, the amount of data, the diversity of data, the timeliness of access to it, and the ability to communicate is increasing. But at the same time, our ability to really digest it and use it in a meaningful way has decreased. So there's an element of overload of information sitting in different places that it's hard to make sense of, with the opportunity to do a lot more. Now, this means that if we put the necessary tools in place and standardize our approach between how healthcare organizations and consumer electronics and digital health tools are able to both receive and then provide meaningful feedback, we're putting ourselves in a really optimal position to utilize what's there. This is where AI comes in. AI is really a means to make sense of large amounts of data in a faster way to allow and offload some of that task from caregivers. And when applying this to clinical trials, it can manifest in certain ways. By having access to better data, we can design better trials. At a time we know the inclusion-exclusion criteria, the subgroups that have to go in. Because there's a lot more reach outside of, let's say, the radius of a tertiary health care center, we can recruit patients and serve them maybe in more remote, be more inclusive. And ultimately, we can improve the process from onboarding, tracking, asking questions, and understanding what's happening to a patient in between these visits that traditionally were happening within centers in an in-person interview on paper. So I really see the opportunity in those major areas, and the challenge is largely I think, an infrastructure one.
So how do you feel the healthcare system, or even I guess at the federal level, how do you think they need to be involved, and what sort of changes or policies that should they be bringing in to facilitate positive change? And I'm also talking about, this issue of interprovincial sort of communication and data sharing with, really each province having its own sort of unique health system, and how do we bridge that gap, and what are some of the solutions there, and the role of the federal government in this, do you see?
That's a great question. I think the way healthcare is handled, because it is both federal and provincial, all the way down to how local centers handle it, there's a multitude of initiatives that are happening at the same time, and they weren't necessarily coordinated. I think from the federal level, providing support and coordination, the funding and some of the incentives for groups to start working together is a big element. That's been happening. I think ISED has kind of started that with the HTP and a lot of the different programs that it put forth. At a more granular level, I think we have the opportunity to set standard frameworks for the technologies that people implement, because there's a lot of optionality on going with existing large industry players, homegrown startups such as ours, or things that are being built out of healthcare organizations where a lot of innovation can happen. The possibility of developing something or adopting something is really large, but to ensure that it can work across all these different places hasn't been achieved yet. Some of the places where technology can really help, especially now when we're talking about AI, is ensuring that we're not breaking some of the safeguards that exist in the current healthcare system. That means really data privacy and governance, ensuring that healthcare organizations can maintain control over the data without having to export it, ensuring that patients ultimately are able to consent for the use of their data, whether it's for care or research or development of new tools. And some of these frameworks exist. They're new. things like federated learning, where you can learn across sites without moving the data, and it really is AI technology traveling almost like a resident would from one hospital to another and learning and coming back. Blockchain that we're going to talk about is going to enable a lot of things on the patient side. So I think the tools are there, and the effort is in coordinating everyone and coming to a common understanding and a common framework that can be implemented.
Yeah, and also I think the comfort, not only from a societal level, a patient level, but also the clinician level, the comfort with using AI and understanding AI and the education and the training, I think, that are required. So no, thanks, Cam. Those are really great points, and it's sort of, and we'll get to the blockchain with Victoria, and then how AI then molds into that sort of framework. But I wanted to talk to get Howard's views on real world data, because now real world data has to now be brought into big data sets, and there are challenges in terms of how to collect real world data. What does it mean? How to interpret real world data? So, Howard, how can real world data and patient-reported outcomes supplement clinical trial data, where current data sets and types of clinical data may be limiting? How do you see their value and their positioning?
So I think real world data represents a huge wealth of information for access, and the first step is actually creating probably a minimum data set that's either equivalent to clinical trial data or acceptable for either health regulatory, like Health Canada, or health technology assessments. And from that, once we have that minimum data set, can we then extract that from patient outcomes, et cetera? And that's where AI is really starting to help, where we're using AI now to go through patient charts to extract that data as well. So one is actually accessing the data, but the other is providing that counterfactual for some of these phase 2 studies where we don't have untreated groups. So can we go into the real world data to provide the comparator groups so that these treated patients can be compared to untreated patients, so that we can help with determining value, because you do need to have something as a comparison. And that's sometimes that stumbling block. So this is where I think real world data can help supplement clinical trial data. And the honest truth is, for the most part, clinical trial data is a highly selected population, represents maybe 5 to 10% of the total population. So we have all this extra data where we can truly see what is that value for patients as well.
No, I agree, because most clinical trials are done in very unique late stage patient populations, for example, phase 1s, and then we move to phase 2, 3 trials, arguably in a larger, earlier stage patient population, less advanced, and then we're sort of applying the learnings from not the right patient subsets to then develop drugs in other patient subsets. And so it was a great idea to include data on untreated patients or patients just are undergoing standard of care. The other question is, health economic science and how you feel that plays a role, and are we doing enough of it? Because this question comes up when we're dealing with new therapies, new combinations, new biomarkers. It's like there's a cost to all this, and then there's this cost-benefit ratio, and then quality of life and quality. Can you give us a little perspective on that?
Yeah, I think our current paradigm is what we do is we take the clinical trial data and try to squish it into the health economics box at the end. And then we always end up going, well, why isn't this funded, or where's that value? And we often kind of, I think as clinicians or even clinical trial design, we often probably need to start a bit backwards and start to see what those health technology assessments or the health economic endpoints are that they need to help generate these regulatory decisions. So I think this is where having health economics is really quite helpful. And we're fortunate to be working with a lot of our health economists. And even now with CADIS, companies can submit the clinical trial design up front to look at, are they designing the trial properly? Will this meet health regulatory standards? And this is where I do think we need to incorporate that sooner, especially in Canada. And we're not the only nation where we do these health technology assessments to look at value. This is really important because we have, these drugs are really expensive. And are we truly getting value back? And this is where I think we need to generate a learning healthcare system instead of just funding something and saying, okay, we're done. Let's keep reassessing things and seeing if we're getting the value.
Right. I mean, many accelerated approval agents are not proving their worth in terms of overall survival. And many of them, even when they're not showing overall survival, many of them, their withdrawal from the market is quite delayed. So Victoria, we got into, of course, with Cam, the questions about big data, AI, and then the question of privacy and some of the issues of how we can actually do that in a meaningful way where everybody feels protected and then willing to share their data. This is still such an obstacle. There's, societal issues, legal issues. And as you, a world leader in blockchain technology, it would be interesting to get your perspectives on how you feel blockchain technology can be a game changer for precision oncology, and what are the challenges faced. And I think you have like a 1 minute video or something you wanted to show us, because a lot of people don't know what blockchain is, and so I think we need to all be educated.
Yeah. Thanks, Laszlo. Yeah, that's the first step. So maybe if we could queue up the video, we'll just have a 1.5 minute primer on blockchain technology, and then I'll get into how I think it can be applied specifically for clinical trials. So over to our host to queue up the video.
We are creating, accumulating, and monetizing data like never before. Yet at the same time, societal trust is eroding. With every news report of disinformation, identity falsification, privacy invasion, and the penetration of seemingly secure repositories, we become increasingly skeptical about the information we hear, the systems through which we communicate and transact, and the companies and institutions that sustain them. Blockchain is a digital record-keeping technology that enables new ways to secure trust in business and social networks, and is evolving into a critical tool for innovation and value creation. Despite its origins in finance, the potential of blockchain stretches far beyond cryptocurrencies. So amidst all this noise, organizations are left wondering, what does blockchain really mean for our business? Is this relevant for us? Blockchain at UBC is an award-winning multidisciplinary research cluster that brings together a community of academic, industry, and community partners interested in exploring blockchain and distributed ledger technology and its impact on society. Unlike other programs, which generally view blockchain from a finance, economics, or engineering perspective, we view blockchain as a complex system combining technical, data, and human components. We draw upon our network of industry partners that provide their perspectives, offer examples, on-the-ground experiences, and advice for designing, building, and scaling blockchain use cases.
Great,
Okay,
thanks,
so
Victoria.
So
please go ahead. Just continue with your comments on how do you feel it'll be a game changer for precision oncology, and what are some of the issues and challenges that we're facing in adopting this?
Right. Yeah. So you would appreciate from the video that, we don't look at blockchain at UBC, at blockchain specifically as a cryptocurrency or a financial technology, but we look at it through the lens of privacy and security. And I do see significant opportunities to improve quality of clinical trial processes and record keeping. I'll just give you an example of a recent study done on the use of blockchain technology in clinical trials. This was conducted by Boehringer Ingelheim in collaboration with IBM. And researchers found that a total of 12 trial participants, 7 study coordinators, and 3 clinical research associates across 5 sites that participated in the pilot experienced significant improvements in the clinical trial process. So it reduced mean monitoring visit time and cost versus standard trial management. And it enhanced patient trust and transparency and empowerment. And there was no difference in non-compliances as a marker of the trial quality. So overall, it was a huge success as an initial pilot into how a clinical trial of the use of blockchains for clinical trials, if you will. So that said, not all blockchains are created equal. And one of the challenges is that you have to pay careful attention to security, privacy, and regulatory compliance in the design of the solution. It doesn't necessarily, just because you're using blockchain, guarantee that privacy will be respected, that security will be taken care of. So to unleash the potential, you really need to be aware of what we call the technical components, but the informational aspects as well as the social aspects. And speaking of health economics, looking at those social aspects in terms of how do we align the incentives of various stakeholders in the clinical trial process. This is an important part of designing an effective blockchain solution. So the capabilities are there, and they can be enhanced, going back to Cam's point, by the intersection of blockchain technology and artificial intelligence, privacy-preserving artificial intelligence techniques like fully homomorphic encryption, the use of trusted execution environments, and federated machine learning. So with the two technologies working together, you really have a powerful elixir for transformation. So I'm really excited about the potential and the possibilities for improving clinical trials that can be realized through blockchain and AI. Blockchain as a foundational infrastructure to bring together key stakeholders in the clinical trial process, to collect and secure, importantly, in today's environment, real-world data, improve patient engagement, and encourage a learning healthcare system through greater transparency and traceability of outcomes. I think it's got huge potential in this area.
No, those are excellent points. And it got me thinking too of, Cam, about the DHDP and Amagia's role right now in this cross-Canada Federated Learning Network, and how blockchain technology can be envisioned, at least in some use cases. For example, one of the interesting questions is, given this technology and its approach and this individual user control and safety, and this actually maybe delves into Howard's comments about real-world data and patient-reported outcome. Do you see blockchain as being something where patients will then participate in maybe monitoring themselves and really uploading and sharing more real-world data and patient-reported outcomes that then go into this larger data continuum while maintaining privacy? So Howard or Victoria, you can address that.
Yeah, I think there's
maybe go ahead. Go ahead, Howard.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Especially right now, I think one of the biggest concerns is privacy for patients, and even how we transfer data across jurisdictions. So I think blockchain represents this, I think huge advance where patients can feel more comfortable, especially with genomic information, where patients are worried about, what if my genomic information gets out to my health insurance or my employer? Discrimination. And then to Cam's point, what if now we can have more wearable information about toxicity, and that can be sent privately through, and we collect that information as well. Like, there's just a huge expansion of the information, but we need to make sure it's still kept private. And I think this is where Victoria really generates that excitement where we can securely do this.
So Victoria, what are your views on the opportunities here and some of the risks?
I totally agree that there are great opportunities here. I think that what I'm seeing are blockchain pilots and experimentation where the data are secured using a blockchain. Things like consent and data sharing happen, and they're recorded on some level on a private permissioned blockchain. So we're not talking about the big public permissionless open to everybody blockchains like Bitcoin or Ethereum. We're talking about quite private and secured blockchains. But even there, I think you have to pay a very close attention to making sure that what's recorded on the blockchain doesn't accidentally leak private information about someone. So even the fact that someone's consented to participate in a clinical trial and that's recorded on a blockchain can leak information that they don't want shared with insurance companies, for example. So what we've been experimenting with and developing in collaboration with Molecular U through Canada's Digital Technology Supercluster is a personal health wallet where individuals themselves receive their health data in the form of verifiable credentials. It's held securely and under the control of the individual on their mobile phone, and they make decisions about whether they'll share the data and um, and they share securely through a peer-to-peer communication channel rather than having the data or the exchange recorded on a blockchain. The blockchain is used to set up the secure communication channel that takes place. So that's how blockchain's used in this approach. Challenges are, of course, that you have to have a population that has access to the smartphone technology that such solutions leverage. You have to make sure that people can understand, how to participate in these kinds of research projects and assess their risks and know how they can consent and what they're consenting to. So there's an education that has to take place uh, along with the patient engagement that can happen, where patients need to understand how to use and interact with this novel technology. But the potential is huge. That way, we can really have our cake and eat it too. We can have the real world data that we need. We can make sure that it's private and secure and compliant with regulations, and we can make sure that patients are engaged. That's the real sweet spot that we want to head for.
Great. I mean, actually, you just gave a beautiful sort of lead into, my questions to Olivier, because this is the challenge, I think, right now with all these new technologies and data technologies. I think there's a lot of misinformation, good information, but bad information. We're living in this, this huge information age of social media where there's so much information and information overload. So, Olivier, how do you view this issue in terms of patient engagement, in terms of educating patients and their risks, and how do we engage in patient groups in this changing environment, and then really helping them understand and advocate for
Well,
these new clinical trial and data approaches?
Well, as mentioned just before, there's a challenge, obviously, but what Victoria has brought to the table, and same thing for our two other colleagues today, is opportunities at numerous levels, but the sense of security, compliance, and the urgency of going ahead with all these opportunities, it kind of creates an environment where it brings doubt. And that's what usually patients or the grand public is not so willing to jump in from day one. And you need social acceptance from the community to go ahead. But the more innovation like blockchains per se reinforces the sense of diligently going through innovation, it can only helps to accelerate social acceptance. And now we have early adapters that creates a huge load of data. But once social acceptance has gone through and the grand public adheres to it and participate, the amount of data collected will be tremendous, and we'll see the true benefits of it upstream and downstream, because real world evidence research will be rocketed to a new level of heights because of the quality and quantity of information that will be available. So it is great to hear what you all have mentioned in the previous questions. Regarding the patient view, I've just mentioned education and social acceptance about these innovation. But if we look at research per se, the education or the fight to bring down the stigmas of research and clinical trials within the patient community in Canada is not over. Actually, a lot of patients and the grand public still believe that research and clinical trials are only meant for those who no longer have options. Actually, we still need to continue to do this. So patient groups are doing a wonderful job at it. Clinicians more and more in their day-to-day interaction with their patient clientele are still bringing that added value of clinical trials. It's not necessarily there because we have no option. There are trials on quality of life improvement. So we may alter the treatment regimen to see if we can minimize toxicity. They're exploring different avenues like that. Investigator-initiated trials sometimes brings a new perspective on how to manage symptoms or side effects. So clinical trials is there along the way in the patient journey, and is education that still needs to continue, as well as we're educating the patient population about these great innovative opportunities. So it means that there's a lot of interactions at the patient level that are needed on top of the doctors to patient interaction that is coming along with the burden of the disease. So it's a lot. It's a lot for the patient, but all in all the professionals that are interacting with patients, they know, and there's a fine balance to get. And if we get together and provide the right educational tools in a patient-friendly format, respecting time it takes to digest everything and make their head on whether or not they feel comfortable with being early adapters of innovation in healthcare, well, it is a respectful relationship that exists and should still exist, and only then we'll go forward. But these patient-centered approach to clinical trials, SPOR, or in Quebec, we have the stratégie de recherche axée sur le patient. This is done independently of whatever the grand public reacts. It is creating a better research environment that is more, I'd say, flexible and agile or resilient towards adopting innovation. And this is critical to position Canada as an environment of choice for research. We have not only to do it for ourselves, but consider that we're doing it in a competitive international market where we want investment in life science to happen in Canada. We have state-of-art institutes, we have the searchers, we have the brains, we have everything to make it happen. And at the end of the day, more trials, more research means more treatment options for patients, more innovative treatment that reach bedsides. And this can only benefit patients and caregiver.
No, these are very good points, Olivier. And, this point again about the patient-centric learning health system that we all aspire to, and that patients need to know that clinical trials are not just sort of the last option, but it's really not a unique, but really a normal part of their clinical care, especially in precision medicine, where each patient becomes sort of an N of one, and we longitudinally follow a patient through biomarkers and select the right therapies. And so what do you feel the role of CPACT, like the Canadian Partnerships Against Cancer and the Canadian Cancer Research Alliance? I know that there was, they recently have crafted their strategic plans and patient engagement, and they were talking about galvanizing the Canadian public, against cancer and everything like that. How do you see their role, Olivier, here too as well in this?
Well, that again is a great initiative, as we were talking before about educating the grand public and engaging, whether or not you are living with a diagnosis that puts you as a potential clinical trial candidate. You need to know that it exists, because you never know once you're going to need to rely on a clinical trial to improve your outcomes. But at the more structural level, it contributes to the overall change we're mentioning. I mean, all these valorisation des données, like the Ministère du Québec has just created a new ministry, which is the Ministère de la Transformation numérique and the Ministère des Données, because they know that it will need to be done at an higher level in order to minimize the risk of multiplying silos and again going into an environment that is a patchwork of different solutions that doesn't speak to each other. So there's a way to do it all together. And also, if we're doing it the right way in each of these independent provincial systems, the likelihood of these provincial systems be able to communicate within each other and create a pan-Canadian network, well, that's even better, because as we know, research is not limited to provincial borders. Multicentric research studies, they exist. And the rare disease landscape, if you limit your patient population to a given province, you don't have the number to justify your science or your bringing in trials. You need the pan-Canadian perspective, the force of the numbers. So collaboration is the key to make sure that we have a coast-to-coast approach to these opportunities.
Yeah, so
and I'm pretty sure we're well equipped.
Yeah, these larger federal government and sort of cross-Canadian agencies need to step up. And make sure sort of we act all together and develop a unified strategy, a cross-provincial strategy. I think we have a tremendous opportunity to do that by leveraging CPAC, CCRA, and other institutions. Of course, the Marathon of Hope Cancer Center initiative and the Digital Health and Discovery platform, I think, are then fantastic tools to blend into this, and making sure our patients are engaged 100% in everything we do, and educating them and really coming into the decision making, I think.
And I think Cam really nailed it before earlier when he mentioned that there's a leadership role at the federal level that needs to be done, and leadership can also help with funding to make sure that funds are there in sufficient manners in different jurisdictions to make things right and not create dead ends at some point in some jurisdictions.
So we're getting close up to the hour, and maybe I'll just give each panel member maybe 30 seconds to a minute just to sort of summarize any other last minute points of view. So Cam, do you want to, any parting words of wisdom on your part in terms of AI and big data and how to, incorporate this vis-a-vis our discussion?
Sure. I think something that I took away from this discussion is that we need to build trust. This comes through time, education, and understanding of what these technologies can bring. I really believe that technology can be part of the solution to allow building of trust both from government, healthcare organizations, and patients with their data and what can be done, so that when industry comes and wants to work with you, it doesn't feel very one-sided, where they're kind of mining or taking away value and leaving us behind. And I'm very optimistic about the possibilities, especially seeing how more and more across all players we're coming together and open to really collaborating and exploring what can be done with, so far, great success. So I'm excited for what the future brings.
Howard, any sort of final words of wisdom on real world data and how we need to improve on that? Another perspective.
Like Cam alluded to, I think there's lots of opportunity. We're very lucky in Canada. We're a single payer system, and there's a wealth of data. And there's all this great technology to ensure, number one, that we can extract the data with AI, share the data, engage patients, and with blockchain, create privacy and security. So I think all of this can help us actually get better data and share the data and really become a world leader in this.
And Victoria?
Yeah, I agree with everyone. There's significant opportunity here. We need to continue to raise awareness about the potential of for specifically blockchain, but all of these technologies, which this panel, of course, is doing. We need to be able to think differently about our processes, though. Too, we've got rich potential of rich biomarker data sets here in Canada because of the diversity of our population, and we need to be open to new therapeutic approaches that change the clinical trial process because they're targeting biomarkers. And there's a perfect opportunity to be open to changing the processes using these technologies. So we also need pilots. We need more pilots of, for example, blockchain-based clinical trial usage, so that we can learn from that, what the potential is and how to improve the processes. So I look forward. Anybody who's interested in doing that, reach out. I look forward to participating in that transformation that can happen.
Right, and Olivier, any last minute?
I think you guys have said it all, but let's seize the opportunities that we have in Canada. Let's make the life science environment as competitive as it is. Let's attract more trials so that patients has more options to improve patient outcomes. And that's the idea. At the end of the day, let's make sure as a society we have the best options when we need them.
Yeah, very, very good words to end. And I really learned a lot from all of you. And, I jotted down 4 words, I think, that are sort of kind of symbolize, in a way, summarize trust, engagement, community, education, where we need to have trust in each other the patient, the clinician, the system, the data sharing, the privacy, the education to educate and engage our patient and engage our patients, the clinicians engaging the patients, the researchers engaging the patient, and the community, where we need to get together in a really holistic, comprehensive, national kind of coordinated effort to prevent silos and fragmentation in developing these new paradigms, because we have a chance to do it right. And so I like to thank all our panel members, and I'll give it back to Anne Marie right now. And as I think we hit the top of the hour, and I think we also need time for some audience questions too as well, that we hope the panel can answer as well. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Laszlo, for your excellent guidance and management of an outstanding panel. Thank you to each of Howard, Olivier, Cam, and Victoria as well for all of their insights that they shared today. I really like a comment that one of our panelists made about how do we ensure that Canada is positioned as an environment of choice for research. And it seems to me that based on this panel, we have many of the ingredients for success. We just need to make it happen. And again, we have had throughout this conference a number of different thoughts and directions on collaborations across the system to indeed make things happen. We're going to go now to some of the audience questions that are here, and I'll direct those to each of those panelists as we see them. Hello, everyone. Wonderful job. Nice to see everyone. I've got several questions coming in from the audience, and I'm going to start with one that's not directed at anyone specifically. So, Laszlo, perhaps you can help me tailor where it might go. But here's the question, is that essentially there's a lot of rich data in the Canadian cancer registries, but there's a lot of process limitations that inhibit real-time actionable interventions and timely information. How and at what stage could AI best be used to expedite access to timely information? So knowing that this is a large process, knowing that AI has a lot of different applications, at what stage in the data collection, cleaning, or reporting process could AI best be utilized for action today versus in a broader sense? Is there someone take that?
I would say Cam would be the best person to answer that, and then maybe Victoria could chime in, because the privacy issues and how that needs to be brought in terms of the rapidity of the data sharing through these sequential mechanisms.
So yeah, I'll lay it out as three main barriers that are standing there. One, that registries aren't up to date. They're very complete when the information is there, but it takes a lot of time to put information into registries where, for example, I know several that are 2 years behind, 3 years behind in just having the data in the registry. So you can definitely speed up by automating some of it and building tools. We've definitely had some projects where we've collaborated with registries and hospitals to facilitate this, to reduce the gap and offload some of the work from registrars. Beyond that, when data is in a registry, it's still behind the hospital firewall and not readily usable. So depending on where we are, the first step is establishing a usable format, meaning that it has to get transferred into a data lake and ideally processed and indexed for rapid search. I know institutes that are developing their own data lakes, UHN being one, McGill and several others, Citadel at CHUM, as well as industry solutions like ours that help establish one. And these are all centers that we are collaborating with or in the process of collaborating with, where hopefully the technology will be there to both facilitate the transfer of information into a registry and then make it more usable by having it sitting in in a format and a place where it's readily searchable and can be extracted into an AI-ready format.
And how far is this a short, medium, long-term project? Can you just give us a view on, say we wanted to do something in the next 9 months? Are we there? Possible?
We're getting there. It's actively ongoing and improving. Like many things, it doesn't go as fast as we'd hope, but ideally within the next 9 to 18 months, we're going to have significant strides towards being able to search access, or hospitals being able to search access to data and use it for AI projects.
Yeah. Very, very, very encouraging. Victoria, did you have a question or a comment to add to that? The question fundamentally is, where in this data-rich registry environment does AI have the best application to make some short-term strides?
Yeah, I think what I'll do is respond looking at it through a security lens and a privacy lens. So whenever you start talking about bringing together data into data lakes, that becomes a more attractive target for hackers and people who want to gain unauthorized access to the data. So whilst these are very important aggregations of data, what we also have to make sure that we're able to do is properly secure. So some of the approaches to AI that I'm quite interested in, and maybe this isn't next 6 months, but it certainly, there is a roadmap and a pathway for the future, is the combination of edge computing and federated machine learning. So you can take some of these smaller data lakes and consider them edges. So you don't have to begin pooling and pooling and pooling. You can consider them edges, and the machine learning, basically with federated machine learning, reaches out and actually does the computing right in, at the edge, and builds up larger models based on accessing data that isn't pooled together in one single place, but that it analyzing in different places. Now, what I like to think about, as somebody who is researching in decentralized technologies, is even pushing that decentralized model further. And what if the edge wasn't the data lakes, but a combination of data lakes and actually data held on individuals' smartphones? So in much smaller places and pools of data, we could reach out, and if the individual themselves has control over that data in their smartphone, and we're using blockchain technology that preserves the privacy of the communications that is happening, then we've got a really powerful decentralized model that is difficult for any single attacker to really break into a large quantity of data. And so that's the model that I would like to see us move toward, is a more decentralized approach to data, where data is stored, and how data is processed and analyzed using artificial intelligence.
Thank you so much. Laszlo, did you want to have a final word on this, or shall we go to the next question? Yes, Laszlo, I'm afraid we're on mute.
I didn't realize I was on mute. Apologies. Yeah, it got me thinking that, the privacy versus the data sharing and real time, if we can share real time clinical data to drive real time algorithms to then make real time decisions. I mean, obviously that's the holy grail. And the question of privacy and individual phones, I'm always thinking of like hackers. And, one of the thoughts that came to mind is we have a centralized single payer system. Can we have a centralized single payer computer or a network where, let's say, there are kiosks? A patient carries their real-time information on a card or a chip or whatever. They can go to that kiosk and they can say, okay, I will share whatever data is required for a particular study or a trial or whatever, and then it would be linked up to a secure encrypted national network. And so that will actually prevent hackers and other sort of interests coming in. I mean, this could be something that could be envisioned. That just was a crazy thought, but anyway.
Like crazy thoughts. Thank you so much. And I'm going to bridge to another question, and it has been such an important theme of the past 5 years of these conferences. The community, with the leadership of CCC, has always talked extensively about how we engage patients in the clinical trial process. And Olivier, so this question is actually coming your way. And it again is a fairly basic question, but it seems so hard to actually get our heads around in action, which is really, how do we demystify or in fact educate? So there's a demystification of perhaps false or false perceptions about what a clinical trial is, or what even a clinical trial is, period. How do we help people understand what's possible and how they can be proactive and engage themselves in the process? What steps do we need to take?
Well, it is a tough question because it has been asked for decades now.
Yes.
And searchers, clinicians, people in the field, they know the added value of clinical trials in the patient journey. But as long as the patient don't know it themselves or don't recognize it, here's the blockage. But it is as simple as being transparent and show the historical progress of any diseases is thanks to research. Today's standard of cares were yesterday's research, were yesterday's clinical trials. It evolved that way organically. If you look at some diseases where they were not so long ago considered pediatric diseases, thanks to innovation, and I'm thinking about MS or CF. Well, now, like, clinicians are working on geriatric programs for these diseases because patients can live longer and better. But this is the result of improved treatments, improved healthcare, and it all finds its way in the scientific way of doing things, la méthode scientifique, which is peer-reviewed, published, evaluated, reevaluated, and it is robust. It is not an exploratory process. It is done, and the general knowledge of it is not known. We have to continue educate our population about the real value of research and share successes. And we see it with, unfortunately, I don't want to pronounce the word COVID, but I think that was a great case study of bringing innovation to fill an unmet need. We needed quickly clinical trials to happen so that there's a vaccine option for the population, and here it is. And I think we all jumped in and accepted that socially. So that level of acceptance towards research need to be translated to all medical fields.
Thank you. I realize it was a tough question, but we left for the best for last, and we wanted to close on patient engagement. So again, on behalf of CCC, and please, thank you, Howard, for being here, Cam, Victoria, Olivier, and Laszlo for stepping up and facilitating such a fine panel. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll see everybody again soon.